Hi, I'm Yvon Prehn, and welcome to Strategy for Church Communicators, a podcast where I will talk about how to help your church create communications that will enable you to fully fulfill the Great Commission. Our topic today is about Halloween, and if there is ever a holiday that causes controversy in the church, it is Halloween. Some churches welcome it as an opportunity to do community outreach and really creative events. Others shake their fingers at it and condemn churches for even mentioning the term. It's always, though, much easier to curse the darkness than to flood it with light. But taking our cue from the Apostle Paul, who used the pagan idols in Athens as his bridge to sharing the gospel, I'd like to challenge you to use this time of year to share the gospel. Now, I'm going to talk about some things that might be a little bit controversial, but hang in there with me. I also hope to give you some new ideas on your entire approach to Halloween, so you can see that it's much more than just a fun time to give out candy to neighborhood kids and help people to think that your church is a cool church. Because the thing about Halloween that I think is so important and critical for churches to understand is it brings up a topic that most people aren't willing to discuss, and that's the whole topic of death. Now, there's a lot to dislike about Halloween. Its emphasis on, and even its glorification of evil, its focus on death and the macabre. But at the same time, death is not something that people think about or talk about in our prosperity and pleasure-obsessed culture. But instead of running away from it, we can talk about, quite honestly, the one person who in all of history conquered death, and that person, of course, is Jesus. Now, when we look at how to do this, it really helps for us to think about using it as a bridge to the gospel in the same way that Paul did when he wrote to the Corinthians, where he said, now I'm going to read you a Bible verse and then I'll give you my sort of modern day translation or interpretation of it for our current situation. But he said, to the Jews I became like a Jew to win the Jews. To those under the law I became like one under the law, though I myself am not under the law, so as to win those under the law. To those not having the law, I became like one not having the law, though I'm not free of God's law, but under Christ's law, so as to win those not having the law. To the weak, I became weak to win the weak. I have become all things to all people, that if by any means I might save some. Now, think about a modern day paraphrase in this way. To those who celebrate Halloween, I will offer an alternative celebration. To those who want to focus on death, I will offer the consideration of the Savior who conquered death. To those afraid to share the hope that is within them, I will share tools and opportunities to engage their friends in a consideration of Jesus. Our church will do whatever we can during Halloween so that by all possible means we might save some. Churches don't put on alternative Halloween events because the staff's bored has run out of things to do. You spend all kinds of time and trouble and work putting on these events. But I want you to see that you can probably do more and you can make the most of it as an evangelistic opportunity. Once again, the spiritual focus is already there for you. People are thinking about it. A huge amount of marketing is being done on it, the candy in the stores, the sales, all those different things. But what I want you to do is look at in more detail how we can provide an alternative. Now, if you're still feeling guilty, consider the Apostle Paul's example. Now, when Paul got to Athens in Acts 18, before he shared the gospel, he took time to look at what the people already worshipped. Spoiler alert, people are already worshiping Halloween. But anyway, in Athens, this consisted of many idols of pagan gods and altars to them. I'm sure many were beautiful and appealing. Think about the Greek statues that you see in museums and really how beautiful so many of them are. And since the worship of these gods was based, as many of them were, around feasting and sexual excess, they were appealing to many people. But they were not appealing to Paul. Now remember, he didn't go there just to look at them for enjoyment. He was a Jew, raised as a conservative Jew. He knew from a little child on, thou shalt have no other gods before me. He believed in a very strict ethic of purity and sexual purity, and this must have been absolutely disgusting to him. But he went, he studied them, he looked at them because he wanted to reach the people that they appealed to. Now, that's what he did. But I want you to look for a minute or think for a minute on what he didn't do. He didn't berate the Athens for having so many idols. And he could have, like the Old Testament prophets, he could have shouted, abomination, abomination, you're all evil and wicked and you're all going to hell or whatever. But he didn't do that. With the focus of wanting people to come to know the true God, he said, what you worship without knowing, the unknown God, as you refer to him, I want to tell you about who he is and how you can find him. Paul overlooked the obvious and the offensive in idols so that he could see through to the hearts of the people who were searching for God. And like the Apostle Paul, we can take the elements of our culture and use them as a bridge to share the gospel message. At its core, Halloween is really about life after death. Our culture may have twisted and trivialized this holiday, but there is no denying that at this time of year, people are thinking about death and the afterlife probably more than at any other time. It might be a totally distorted view, but it is a topic of conversation. The whole association of Dia de los Muertos has even strengthened that connection. But back again, at the core of the Christian message is a true focus on death and life beyond the grave. Though we may have the same core subject, the Christian view is not about fanciful demons and goblins or grotesque witches or memories of lost family members. Our core belief is that Jesus died a real physical death and 3 days later physically rose from the dead. He, Jesus, conquered death. And he offers the same extraordinary gift to us, a freedom from fear of death and life everlasting to those who trust him as Savior and follow him as Lord. Halloween brings up the topic of life after death into the cultural conversation. People are already talking about it. We simply need tools and activities to turn them to looking at the Christian view of this topic. This is what makes Halloween an absolutely fantastic time for sharing the gospel. Now, in other podcasts and on the website, www.effectivechurchcom.com, and links are in the description of the video. You'll find ready-made resources, handouts, registration cards, all kinds of things that you can use. Everything is completely free, but look them over, adapt it to however your church is going to celebrate Halloween. But remember, this is the time not just to celebrate Halloween, but to introduce people to Jesus, the one person who conquered death and rose again and lives forevermore. I'm Yvon Prehn with Effective Church Communications.